AA12D is about the quotient rule. So C was all about product rule. If two things are being multiplied, expressions that are being divided, we have to use the quotient rule. These are different from if I just had a single term on the bottom that we could rewrite. So if there is a plus or minus, this is where we have to use quotient rule. All right, this is the one I use the most. Now I also write this just a little. I write it as V U prime. And there's a reason where I go with this. Okay. So I write, because I always square the bottom first, then whatever on the bottom, I put on the top, times U prime, and then UV prime. Because I always start with the bottom, and then whatever from the bottom, I move that to the top first. Okay. So this is my U divided by my V. Always square the bottom. No matter what's on the bottom, just square the whole thing. Then move that up top times the derivative of the top. So I'm moving the bottom up, then I take the derivative of the top, V U prime, which is just 3, minus U times V prime. Now, one thing that I noticed, if we look back here, this has UV prime. Sometimes it's helpful to do my V prime first, just because we're going to distribute this. I'm going to distribute this back. 3x squared plus 3 minus, let me put this here because it's easier to distribute the negative 2x. All over. I always keep this bottom. I never mess with that bottom unless I have to at the very end. Now I can combine like terms. So my x squareds match. 3 minus 6, negative 3x squared. And it really doesn't matter what order you want to put it in. And I just keep the bottom. So that's pretty straightforward if you just follow the rule. Where it gets a little ugly is when they've got square roots with the quotient rule. So here we're going to have to be a little careful. So there's my U and my V. Square the bottom, V U prime minus U V prime. All right. When you square a square, that just becomes the fourth. So be careful. We square the bottom, but what I put on top first is exactly what you see on the bottom. 1 minus 2x squared, that's my V, times U prime, the derivative of the square root of x. Here's what I want you to think about. We know the square root of x is x to the 1/2. So when I do the derivative, we've had some practice at moving the 1/2 down, subtracting 1. Now think about moving the x to the negative 1/2 back to the bottom. And x to the 1/2 in the bottom is just the square root of x in the bottom. When you take the derivative of the square root of x. It's really helpful if you can make the transition that the derivative of the square root of x is 1 over 2 square roots of x every single time. 1 over 2 square roots of x minus u, which is our square root of x, times v prime. There's a chain rule here. We first do the power. So bring down the power, subtract 1, times the derivative of the inside, which is negative 2. Simplifying this becomes ugly. So let's just look and see. The first thing that I want you to notice, this is over 1. This is a fraction. I'm going to multiply my tops together and my bottoms together, and I get 1 minus 2x squared all over 2 square roots of x. Okay, now I can multiply negative 2 times the square root of x, and I'm subtracting. So that's really going to be plus 4 square roots of x times that all over 1. All right, so there's a few different things we can do at this point. What the book does is they notice there's a GCF of 1 minus 2x on the top, and they factor it out. That's really kind of the easiest if you understand that. If you factor out 1 minus 2x from the top, I get 1 minus 2x over this plus 4 square roots of x over 1. And this is all being divided by 1 minus 2x to the third. Then this can cancel out one of, oh, this was to the fourth. This can cancel out one of these. That's where it turns to the third. And then I want to get a common denominator here. So my common denominator is 2 square roots of x. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom over here, getting a common denominator. So I have 1 minus 2x over 2 square roots of x plus, now when I multiply, 4 times 2 is 8. Square root of x times square root of x is x, all over 2 square roots of x, all over, this just stays the same all the way through. Now I can combine like terms. So 1 plus 6x over this 2 square roots of x and this is all over 1, so then we multiply by the reciprocal. And just kind of squish it together, and we're done.